The morning sun cast long shadows across Kensington Palace as Prince William sat in his private study, holding a sealed envelope that had arrived through confidential channels. His hands trembled slightly as he recognized the handwriting on the outside. After years of maintaining diplomatic silence about his stepmother Camilla, circumstances had finally pushed him to a breaking point that would change the royal family forever. William's relationship with Camilla had always been complicated. From the moment she entered their lives, casting a shadow over his mother Diana's happiness, he had learned to navigate the delicate balance between family duty and personal feelings. The public saw carefully orchestrated appearances, polite smiles at state functions, and seemingly cordial interactions. Behind palace walls, however, the tension simmered like a pot constantly threatening to boil over. The envelope contained documents that had been discovered during a routine audit of royal correspondence. A junior staff member, unaware of their significance, had forwarded them through proper channels until they reached William's desk. As he read through the pages, his jaw tightened, and the color drained from his face. The papers revealed a series of private communications dating back decades, including arrangements and agreements that had been carefully hidden from public view. For years, William had suspected there were aspects of Camilla's past that remained buried. His late mother had once hinted at things that would shock the nation but had never elaborated, choosing instead to focus on raising her sons with dignity despite her personal pain. Now, holding evidence in his hands, William understood why certain decisions had been made and why specific narratives had been so carefully crafted in the media. The documents revealed a complex web of financial arrangements that predated Camilla's official relationship with Charles. There were property transfers, offshore accounts, and mysterious payments to individuals whose names William didn't recognize. More troubling were references to meetings and agreements that suggested Camilla's integration into the royal family had been orchestrated far earlier than anyone had suspected. William's mind raced back to his childhood, remembering hushed conversations that would stop abruptly when he entered a room. He recalled his mother's tears, not just from the pain of betrayal, but from a deeper knowledge of something she couldn't fight against. The pieces of a decades-old puzzle were finally falling into place, painting a picture that challenged everything the public had been told about the royal family's modern history. The prince stood and walked to the window, looking out at the manicured gardens where he had played as a child. Those had been simpler times, before he understood the weight of crown and duty, before he learned that palace walls could hide secrets that shaped nations. His brother Harry had chosen to walk away from it all, perhaps sensing that some truths were too heavy to bear while wearing the royal mantle. As news of William's discovery began to circulate among senior palace staff, an emergency meeting was called. The Queen's private secretary arrived within the hour, his usually composed demeanor showing cracks of concern. They sat across from each other in William's study, the documents spread between them like evidence in a trial that was about to begin. "Your Royal Highness," the secretary began carefully, "these papers, their authenticity must be verified before any action is taken." William's eyes flashed with determination. "They're real, Edward. The watermarks, the signatures, the dates, they all match palace records. Someone wanted these hidden forever, but secrets have a way of surfacing, don't they?" The implications were staggering. If made public, the information would not only damage Camilla's reputation but could potentially shake the monarchy's foundation. The careful rehabilitation of her image, the years of strategic public relations, the gradual acceptance by the British people, all of it hung in the balance. Catherine, William's wife, found him later that evening in their private apartments. She had learned to read her husband's moods over their years together, and the tension radiating from him was palpable. Without a word, she sat beside him, offering silent support as he grappled with the decision that lay before him. "I've spent my entire life protecting the institution," William said quietly, his voice heavy with the burden of his birthright. "But at what cost? How many truths have we buried? How many stories have we rewritten?" Catherine took his hand, understanding the moral dilemma that tortured him. To speak out would mean breaking the royal code of silence that had protected the family for generations. To remain quiet would mean becoming complicit in a deception that had already cost so much. The palace machinery moved into crisis mode as word spread through the inner circle. Communications teams prepared multiple strategies, legal advisors reviewed implications, and security protocols were heightened. Everyone waited for William's decision, knowing that whatever he chose would reverberate through the monarchy for generations to come. Meanwhile, Camilla maintained her schedule of royal engagements, unaware that her carefully constructed world was about to face its greatest threat. She attended a charity luncheon, smiling for photographers and delivering a speech about the importance of transparency in public life. The irony was lost on everyone except the small circle who knew what storm was brewing. Charles, caught between his wife and his son, found himself in an impossible position. Sources close to the king reported heated discussions behind closed doors, with voices raised in a way that violated all protocols of royal behavior. The man who had waited decades to wear the crown now faced a crisis that threatened to tarnish it permanently. As days passed, the tension within the palace became almost unbearable. Staff whispered in corridors, movements were tracked, and alliances were tested. William consulted with trusted advisors, including his grandmother's former private secretary, who had served the royal family for over 40 years. The Queen always said that the truth has a way of finding light, the elderly man told William during a private meeting. She also believed that sometimes the greatest service to the crown was knowing which truths to reveal and which to protect. The question, Your Royal Highness, is not what you know, but what you do with that knowledge. William spent sleepless nights wrestling with his conscience. He thought of his children, growing up in a world where their family's history was sanitized and packaged for public consumption. He thought of his mother, whose story had been edited and revised until even he sometimes struggled to separate fact from fiction. Most of all, he thought about the future of the monarchy in an age where secrets were increasingly difficult to keep. The documents revealed more than just financial improprieties. They suggested a level of planning and manipulation that went against everything the royal family claimed to represent. There were references to media strategies designed to discredit Diana, payments to individuals who had spread rumors, and coordination with powerful figures in British society to ensure Camilla's eventual acceptance. As William delved deeper into the papers, he discovered correspondence that mentioned his own children. Plans had apparently been made for how to manage their public image in relation to Camilla, how to ensure they viewed her as a legitimate grandmother figure, and how to minimize any potential future challenges to her position. The calculated nature of it all sickened him. The prince realized he stood at a crossroads that would define not only his own legacy but the future of the British monarchy. The institution his grandmother had dedicated her life to preserving faced its greatest internal threat not from Republicans or modernizers, but from the secrets it had kept hidden in its own vaults. As he prepared to make his decision, William knew that speaking out would require more courage than any battlefield or public duty had ever demanded. The palace that had been his home, his prison, and his destiny would never be the same once he broke his silence. The only question that remained was whether the truth would strengthen the monarchy by cleansing it of deception, or whether it would deal a blow from which the institution might never recover. The stage was set for a confrontation that would echo through the corridors of power and into the homes of millions who had followed the royal family's saga for generations. William's choice would not just expose Camilla's hidden secret, it would challenge the very nature of what it meant to be royal in the modern age. The atmosphere inside Buckingham Palace had never been more suffocating. William arrived for the family summit that had been hastily arranged under the guise of discussing upcoming royal tours. Every senior member of the family was present, their faces masks of practiced composure that barely concealed the underlying tension. Camilla sat beside Charles, her posture perfect, unaware that her stepson carried documents that could unravel everything she had worked decades to build. The meeting began with routine matters, but William's unusual silence didn't go unnoticed. Princess, and always astute, watched her nephew with knowing eyes. She had lived through the Diana years, had seen the pain inflicted on her nephews, and had maintained her own counsel about Camilla's arrival into their lives. Something in William's bearing told her that today would be different. When the formal agenda concluded, William remained seated as others began to rise. His voice, when he spoke, carried an authority that made everyone freeze. "I need to address something that cannot wait any longer," he said, his words cutting through the room like a blade through silk. Charles's face underwent a transformation as William began to speak about discoveries that had been made, about documents that painted a very different picture of the royal family's recent history. Camilla's carefully maintained composure began to crack as William, with measured precision, laid out what he had learned. The room became a tableau of shock, denial, and dawning realization. The secret that emerged was more complex than simple adultery or financial impropriety. The documents revealed that Camilla had been part of a larger network of aristocrats and power brokers who had essentially orchestrated her position within the royal family as part of a broader agenda. This group, with connections reaching into the highest levels of British society, had worked for decades to ensure certain bloodlines and interests remained protected within the monarchy. William revealed correspondence showing that Camilla's first marriage to Andrew Parker Bowles had itself been arranged to provide cover for her ongoing relationship with Charles. More shocking still were documents suggesting that certain members of the establishment had actively worked to undermine Diana's position, viewing her as an unpredictable threat to their carefully maintained order. Financial records showed a complex web of trusts, shell companies, and property holdings that had been used to funnel resources and maintain influence. Properties that appeared to belong to various charitable organizations were actually controlled by this network, providing meeting places and safe houses for activities that would have scandalized the nation if exposed. Camilla's reaction was telling. Instead of denial or tears, she maintained an icy silence, her eyes fixed on William with a mixture of respect and calculation. She had underestimated Diana's eldest son, assuming his sense of duty would always outweigh his pursuit of truth. In that moment, she recognized the same steel in him that had made his grandmother such a formidable monarch. Charles found himself torn between his roles as king, husband, and father. The documents William presented didn't just implicate Camilla, they showed his own complicity in allowing this shadow network to operate within royal circles. His signature appeared on documents he claimed not to remember, authorizing arrangements that benefited Camilla's associates at the expense of the crown's independence. The revelation that sent the deepest shockwaves through the room concerned the circumstances surrounding Diana's death. While not suggesting direct involvement, the documents revealed that the same network had been monitoring Diana's movements and relationships, viewing her growing independence and platform as a threat to their interests. There were references to contingency plans and permanent solutions that, while carefully worded, carried sinister implications. William's voice broke for the first time as he read from a particular document dated just weeks before his mother's death. It discussed concerns about Diana's planned revelations and her intentions to take her sons away from the suffocating influence of the palace. The language was clinical, treating the Princess of Wales as a problem to be managed rather than a human being and mother. Princess Anne was the first to break the stunned silence. "How long have you known?" she asked Camilla directly, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had never been fooled by the carefully crafted public narrative. Camilla's response revealed the depth of her involvement. Instead of claiming ignorance, she launched into a defense that chilled everyone present. She spoke of tradition, of preserving the monarchy from modernizing forces that would destroy it, of Diana's unsuitability for royal life and the threat she posed to established orders. Her words painted a picture of someone who genuinely believed they had saved the monarchy from itself. The security implications of what William revealed were staggering. If such a network had operated within royal circles undetected for decades, what else had been compromised? Who else was involved? The head of royal security, present at the meeting, was already mentally cataloging the investigations that would need to be launched. Edward, the king's brother, posed the crucial question that hung in the air like smoke from a funeral pyre. "What do you intend to do with this information, William?" The future king's response would define the monarchy's path forward. He spoke of his duty not to the institution as it was, but as it should be. He talked about his children growing up in a palace built on lies, about the British people's right to truth, and about his mother's legacy being honored with honesty rather than propaganda. The meeting descended into chaos as different factions emerged. Some argued for complete transparency, believing the monarchy could only survive by purging itself of corruption. Others warned that revelation would mean the end of the thousand-year-old institution, that Republican forces would use the scandal to finally topple the crown. Camilla, finally, showing emotion, turned to Charles with tears in her eyes. But they weren't tears of remorse, they were tears of rage at seeing her life's work threatened. She accused William of destroying his father's happiness out of loyalty to a ghost, of being willing to bring down the entire monarchy for the memory of a woman who had been dead for decades. The confrontation between stepmother and stepson was raw and unprecedented in royal history. William stood his ground, listing the lies, the manipulations, and the lives destroyed in service of Camilla's ambition. He spoke of staff members who had been dismissed for asking questions, of journalists who had been threatened or bought off, of a cancer that had metastasized throughout the institution he was born to lead. Charles attempted to mediate, but his moral authority had evaporated. The documents showed he had been weak rather than evil, allowing himself to be manipulated by stronger personalities who used his love for Camilla as a lever to control the monarchy. His attempts to minimize the revelations only deepened the family's fracture. As hours passed, the true scope of the scandal became clear. It wasn't just about one woman's ambition or one man's weakness. It was about a systematic subversion of the monarchy by interests that viewed it as their personal property. Names emerged of politicians, business leaders, and media moguls who had participated in this shadow governance. The younger royals present, William's cousins and siblings of his generation, watched in horror as their elders' carefully maintained facades crumbled. They had grown up believing in the institution's dignity, only to discover it had been hollowed out from within. Their faith in the system that defined their lives was shaken to its core. Catherine emerged as an unexpected voice of wisdom, suggesting that the path forward required neither complete revelation nor continued concealment. She proposed a controlled disclosure that would acknowledge wrongdoing while protecting the monarchy's future. Her proposal showed the political acumen that would one day make her a formidable queen. But William had moved beyond compromise. Years of suppressed anger, grief, and frustration culminated in a declaration that stunned even those who knew him best. He announced his intention to hold a press conference, to lay bare the truth regardless of consequences. The prince who had always put duty first was finally putting truth above tradition. The meeting ended without resolution, family members dispersing to process what they had learned and prepare for what was coming. Camilla left supported by Charles, her empire of secrets crumbling around her. The careful rehabilitation of her image, the years of strategic public relations, the grudging acceptance she had won, all of it was about to be revealed as built on foundations of deceit. In the hours that followed, the palace became a hive of crisis management. Lawyers were consulted, documents were reviewed, and strategies were debated. But everyone knew that William held the power. As heir to the throne, his words would carry weight that no denial could counter. The international implications began to emerge as well. Intelligence services had to consider whether foreign powers had known about or exploited this network. Diplomatic relationships built on the monarchy's perceived stability and integrity would need to be reassessed. The scandal threatened to extend far beyond family drama into matters of national security. As night fell over London, William stood in his office, looking at a portrait of his mother that hung on the wall. He had made his decision, knowing it would transform the monarchy forever. The boy who had walked behind his mother's coffin, maintaining composure for the sake of the institution, was finally ready to speak the truths that grief and duty had forced him to swallow. The morning of William's scheduled press conference arrived with an electric tension that seemed to grip the entire nation. News had leaked that the Prince of Wales would be making an unprecedented statement, and speculation ran wild across media platforms. Outside Kensington Palace, crowds gathered despite the early hour, sensing they were about to witness a historic moment that would reshape the British monarchy forever. Inside the palace, William dressed with deliberate care, choosing his military uniform, a visual reminder of his service and dedication to duty. Catherine stood by his side, her presence a silent support that strengthened his resolve. Their children had been sent to stay with Catherine's parents, shielded from the storm that was about to break. Across London at Clarence House, Camilla sat in her private study, surrounded by advisors who had worked through the night trying to formulate damage control strategies. The woman who had spent decades cultivating her image now faced its complete destruction. Charles had retreated into silence, unable or unwilling to confront the reality of what his pursuit of personal happiness had cost the institution he now headed. The press conference venue, St. James's Palace, had been chosen for its historical significance. It was here that accession councils had been held, where the continuity of the monarchy had been assured through centuries. Now it would host an event that threatened to break that continuity forever. As William entered the room, the assembled journalists fell silent. Many had covered the royal family for decades, but none had witnessed anything like this. The prince's face showed the strain of his decision, but also a clarity of purpose that commanded respect. When he began to speak, his voice carried the weight of truth long suppressed. He started not with accusations but with context, painting a picture of a young boy who had lost his mother under circumstances that had never been fully explained. He spoke of growing up in an institution that demanded public perfection while harboring private corruptions. His words were measured, each sentence building towards revelations that would shake the foundations of British society. When William began detailing the evidence he had discovered, gasps rippled through the room. He presented not just allegations but documented proof of a systematic campaign to manipulate public perception, control the narrative around his mother's life and death, and ensure Camilla's acceptance into the royal family. He named names, cited dates, and revealed communications that exposed the depth of the conspiracy. The most explosive revelation concerned a series of payments made to individuals who had been involved in surveillance of Diana in her final years. William revealed that these same individuals had connections to the network that had promoted Camilla's interests. While stopping short of directly implicating anyone in his mother's death, the connections he drew were damning enough to demand official investigation. He spoke of his mother's fears, documented in letters she had written and hidden, letters that had recently come to light. Diana had known she was being watched, had suspected the forces arrayed against her, but had been dismissed as paranoid. William's voice cracked as he read excerpts from these letters, his mother's words reaching across the decades to vindicate her concerns. The financial aspects of the scandal were equally shocking. William revealed how royal patronages and charitable foundations had been used to reward those who had assisted in Camilla's integration into the family. Donors who had supported certain narratives had received honors and access, while those who questioned the official story had found themselves frozen out of royal circles. As William spoke, emergency meetings were convening across Westminster. The Prime Minister was briefed on the constitutional implications, while the Metropolitan Police began preparing for potential criminal investigations. The scandal threatened to engulf not just the royal family but the entire British establishment that had enabled and protected the conspiracy. Camilla's response came through a hastily prepared statement that only deepened the crisis. Rather than denial or apology, she attempted to justify her actions as necessary for the preservation of the monarchy. She painted Diana as unstable and destructive, claiming that her removal from royal life had been essential for the institution's survival. The statement's tone-deaf nature only reinforced William's accusations of an establishment utterly disconnected from truth and public sentiment. Charles's silence was deafening. The king, who had ascended to the throne he had waited for his entire life, found himself trapped between defending his wife and supporting his son. Palace sources reported that he had effectively abdicated decision-making, leaving the institution rudderless at its moment of greatest crisis. Public reaction was swift and overwhelming. Social media exploded with demands for justice for Diana, while Republican movements saw their support surge overnight. The carefully maintained fiction of royal dignity and service had been shattered, replaced by a narrative of manipulation and betrayal that resonated with every citizen who had ever questioned the official story. International reaction was equally dramatic. Commonwealth nations began openly discussing removing the British monarch as their head of state, while foreign governments reassessed their relationships with a monarchy revealed to be corrupt at its core. The soft power that the royal family had wielded for generations evaporated in hours. Within the palace, alliances shifted rapidly. Younger royals rallied around William, seeing in his actions a chance to reform and modernize an institution that had trapped them in gilded cages. Older courtiers and traditionalists condemned him as a traitor to the crown, arguing that some secrets were necessary for stability. Princess Anne emerged as a crucial figure, publicly supporting William and revealing her own long-held suspicions about Camilla's rise. Her military bearing and reputation for straight-talking gave credibility to William's accusations, while her revelation of attempts to silence her over the years added another layer to the scandal. The legal implications began to unfold rapidly. Scotland Yard announced a formal investigation into several aspects of William's revelations, including potential fraud, conspiracy, and perversion of justice. Lawyers representing Diana's estate filed motions to access previously sealed documents, while journalists who had been threatened or silenced began coming forward with their own stories. As the day progressed, more individuals found the courage to speak. Former palace staff revealed instances of intimidation and coercion. Journalists shared stories of editorial pressure to present certain narratives. Even members of the aristocracy began distancing themselves from what was increasingly seen as a corrupt network that had used the monarchy for its own ends. William's final revelations concerned the future. He presented evidence that the same network that had orchestrated Camilla's rise had been making plans for the next generation, including strategies to control and shape his own children. The thought that the corruption would continue into another generation had been the final straw that compelled him to act. He concluded his statement with a direct address to the British people. He acknowledged that his revelations might wound the monarchy mortally but argued that an institution built on lies could not serve its people. He called for a complete reformation, a cleansing that would either strengthen the crown through honesty or allow it to fall with dignity rather than persist in corruption. The immediate aftermath was chaos. Camilla was effectively under house arrest, not by legal order but by the practical impossibility of appearing in public. Charles retreated entirely from public view, his reign effectively over before it had truly begun. The machinery of monarchy ground to a halt as no one knew who held legitimate authority anymore. Parliament convened an emergency session to discuss the constitutional crisis. Republicans called for abolition, while monarchists argued for reform and redemption. The debate that had simmered under the surface of British society for generations finally burst into the open, fueled by the shocking revelations of how badly the public trust had been betrayed. William found himself in a position he had never sought, the de facto leader of a monarchy in crisis. His actions had destroyed the old order but also created space for something new to emerge. The question facing Britain was whether that new thing would be a reformed monarchy or a republic built on the ashes of a 1,000-year-old institution. Catherine proved herself a formidable partner in this crisis, working to maintain stability for their children while supporting William's push for transparency. Her grace under pressure and obvious integrity provided a potential model for what a reformed monarchy might look like, one based on genuine service rather than inherited privilege and secret networks. As days turned into weeks, the full scope of the scandal continued to emerge. Each new revelation brought fresh calls for justice and reform. The network that Camilla had been part of was exposed as reaching into every major institution in British life, a deep state that had operated in shadows while presenting a facade of tradition and honor. The international community watched with fascination and concern as one of the world's oldest monarchies grappled with its existential crisis. The British example sparked conversations about transparency and accountability in other monarchies, while republics celebrated the vindication of their systems. Throughout it all, William maintained his dignity and purpose. He had sacrificed his position within the traditional monarchy to honor his mother's memory and protect his children's future. Whether he would ultimately wear a crown or not became less important than the principle he had established: that truth matters more than tradition, and that even the most powerful institutions must answer to the people they claim to serve. The palace that had once seemed eternal now stood at a crossroads. The secrets that had been hidden within its walls had been dragged into the light, and the British people would decide whether those walls would continue to stand or whether it was time for a new chapter in their nation's story. William's courage in speaking truth to power had given them that choice, and, in doing so, had perhaps saved the monarchy by being willing to risk its destruction. As the sun set on this tumultuous period, one thing was clear: the age of deference was over. The monarchy, if it survived, would do so not through divine right or inherited privilege, but through earning the trust and respect of the people it served. William had torn down the old facade, and now the work of building something honest and worthy would begin. The boy who had walked behind his mother's coffin had become the man who ensured her truth would finally be told, no matter the cost to the crown he was born to wear.